Radio 1.
All right. The disclaimer is playing now, and then your intro will play shortly.
Okay, thank you. We're ready.
All right. In 3, 2, 1.
Good morning
Good
to our
morning.
audience on the internet, Facebook, and the 8 or 9 radio station. Thanks for joining us again today. We have a lot of legal issues that we have to tackle, probably about 8 to 10. We're going to try to get to as many as possible. And my superstar panel with me today, Attorney Milton, who was a forerunner in terms of police misconduct and videotaping of the Rodney King case, and of course, my master in tax, cybersecurity expert, research analyst, Attorney Vanita Banks. Before we get started, one of the issues, the legal issues in the news all week, there are so many legal issues, but the one that keep cropping up has to do with the castle doctrine or the stand your ground law. And because we have so many shootings, and let's just briefly cover that. You know, essentially the castle doctrine or these stand your ground type laws basically mean that the individual has a legal right to use reasonable force up and including deadly force to protect themselves against an intruder in their home. So the origin of the castle doctrine went back to the 17th century. For a man home is a castle and each man home is his safest refuge. So this law been around for a long time, but the problem is the state legislators in a lot of the states enacted additional legislation that expanded the scope of the castle doctrine. And now they say you can stand your ground, have no duty to retreat. A person may use lethal force to defend themselves against a threat to their lives or someone else's livelihood. So an individual's life is in danger, according to these rules, when they reasonably believe that they may face death, great bodily injury, or harm. So now, in a lot of these states, there's no duty to retreat. As a result, we've seen a proliferation of increase in shooting because America has more guns in private ownership than the rest of the world combined. We are like 3% of the population, but 51% of the private gun ownership. And we've enacted these laws that seem to encourage people to shoot other folks. But that's my thought today. Now, our call-in number is 833-653-3529, 833-653-3529. Now, having said that, we have so many different stories to start with today. And we have the abortion, Dominican voting case, teens getting shot through the door. It goes on and on. And let me do a poll. Which one is the most significant issue of the week, my expert panel?
That's your decision. You're the leader of this.
Well, I tell you what, let's start off with the young man who got shot through the door over in Missouri.
Okay.
And I start off with the castle doctrine because I'm not sure of all the facts of the case. His grandson came on TV, I watched him this morning, and said the grandpa is a racist.
And that he's been radicalized by conservative talk shows and different other input.
Well, they mentioned Fox News, which has also been in the news this week. And we'll get to that second. But, community is rightfully so outraged by this teenager going to the wrong address. And who among us, I wonder, who have made the same mistake? I know I have.
Yeah.
And I had a famous individual here locally, Jim Irsay, was trying to get in my car when we were at our club. And so it happens. And I'm just appalled by the number of people that have been shot by going to the wrong car. We've had that happen here in the city, or the wrong address. So my thought process is, my thoughts and prayer, of course, with the young man who got shot. But I just think that this law needs to have a lot more clarification, because I think too many people trying to take advantage of it and committing heinous crime on innocent individuals.
Well, in a civilized society, I mean, haven't we accepted from the common law up to now that if you brush a person on the street accidentally, I guess that's a battery because it's an unlawful, unconsented to touching. But we know in a civilized society that these types of things occur. And we don't sue and charge people with the crime every time we brush up against a person in public. So there has to be some allowance or tolerance for people making mistakes on getting into cars or turning up the wrong driveway or going to the wrong door, Nate. It's simple as that. So if this man had no fear of any harm coming to him, I don't think there's any justification, whether you're in your castle, my castle, or the White House, to take up arms and shoot someone. And if there's no justification, if there's no danger there, then you should suffer the responsibility for your act, whether you're white or black.
From my perspective, in all of these cases, and we're seeing over the last week, a proliferation of these random shootings on property, on private property, where the victim has made a simple mistake. We've seen, the one young man that was mentioned, he shot after he rang the wrong doorbell. We saw a cheerleader who inadvertently got into the wrong vehicle and was hit with multiple bullets. We saw a young woman killed after she pulled into the wrong driveway. And these are all mistakes that I know I have made and that many of us have made. And I think speak today to the danger of guns in our society and the fact that there are 400 million guns in our country, more guns than people. And so in those random shootings that we've seen, there was no reasonable threat. The Castle Doctrine, which states that, as Attorney Lee described, that, and it's a long-standing precedent that's derived from the English common law, which says that a person's home is their castle. And they have protection in certain circumstances to use force, up to deadly force, to defend themselves against an intruder. In those four circumstances, there was no reasonable threat to use deadly force in those situations.
Well, my problem is that it's an ongoing concept, and some of the pundits have suggested that they're getting information on the news media. They see these, particularly African Americans, and they perceive it as a threat. There was one interesting commentator that talks about the mass shooting and why they would not enact legislation, because he was saying that like 97% of these mass shootings in America are white males. And so, but the problem is that if they see exchanges on TV that make them fearful of these young men, then the problem is likely to reoccur, which leads us into the grand master of them all, the Fox News settlement with Dominion this week. $787.5 million settlement on a defamation First Amendment. Now, the reason that's so important is that Staple Street Capital acquired a 76% stake in Dominion voting system for $38.8 million. Dominion revenue in 2022, as reported, was $17 million. So, in other words, the company had about 100 employees, and they had, paid out 17 point some million and they got 787.5 million. And now, why did they get that money? Well, it turns out that during the election cycle, Fox News gave false information that they knew was false, and they kept giving the information over and over again, these false information concerning the election result. They were claiming that the machine was rigged, and you saw it on the news, and unfortunately, according to the poll, 63% of Republican voters felt that Donald Trump was cheated after they kept listening to these news stories. So American democracy was shaken to its core by these false news reports. Now, so what happened? They pay out a record settlement that is the highest settlement in American history, $787 million, $750 million, for a company that had revenues of 17 million last year. And so, shocking. But when I watched the Fox News telecast after the settlement, I did not see any remorse or contrition, and I didn't see them issue an apology. They just simply said that we settled the dispute, and our number one goal is to report accurate news. I'm saying, what? I mean, somehow they made a positive spin out of almost paying out $750 million. Now the net result, the investors at Dominion, because it's huge settlement, their investment amounts to, for their investment, is 1,427% gain on their investment.
Good.
That's a
Fox
return.
My understanding, Fox didn't blanket this. They got a reserve much more than that 787 million that they paid out, because they're going to be paying out some more coming up with some other people that they defamed, or organizations they defamed, in telling that lie about the election. So they're not worried about that.
There are at least 6 other pending cases.
Yeah, so they don't have to apologize for making a mistake, as you would think. You can't say that this amount was just to sell a difference, but there's no guilt in it. They're guilty of what they're accused of.
And they should have been required to apologize and set the record straight.
Well, they weren't, and they didn't.
That's correct. And they intentionally, and we saw from the email and text and from the depositions of Rupert Murdoch and other Fox executives, that they knew that there was the big lie, right? They knew it was a lie, but they perpetuated this false conspiracy theory that Dominion, which lost a lot of money in terms as a result of the smear on its reputation and brand, but Fox executives perpetuated this big lie that Dominion had rigged the 2020 election in Biden's favor. So at the end of the day, the $787 million was accountability that Fox was required to pay for perpetuating the big lie.
But how many times have you seen in these settlements where okay, that person got found with their hands in a cookie jar or whatever, and there's no admission of it, and the spin from that is they won the matter. They were not responsible. They just settled the lawsuit to get out of the trial, as we normally would do, and you don't pay attention to the amount. And I believe that the spin is going to be, they didn't lose this matter. They just settled it and go on. they didn't do anything wrong. And Giuliani and all of those announcers who was on there telling this lie, and the January 6th incident that came about because of these lies, the spin will be, we were right.
Absolutely, Attorney Grimes. Again, there are at least 6 other lawsuits. There's another election company that's also suing Fox, as well as there are suits against, and again by Dominion, against former Fox attorneys, suits against Lou Dobbs and Rudy Giuliani, Mike Lindell, and others, all associated with damages incurred as a result of the perpetuation of the big lie.
But the big lie goes back to, I think I told you about this book I was reading a few months ago called The 13 Clocks. It was about the 13 colonies and how they deliberately, Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and a few other racist fathers of your country, of our country, decided that in order to get the colonies together and get a common cause threaded throughout these colonies, they had to spread fear and hatred. And they used the black man and slaves and the red man and just disseminated lies on the front page of their 2-page papers across this 13 colonies to say that the slaves were revolting against their masters and they were raping all of the white girls on the plantation, and that the red man was killing the settlers in the outlying areas and drinking their blood. And it created a fear that bonded the colonies, which helped them fight against England. So they found this country on lies, and those types of lies exist to this day. It's a technique. It's a way of getting your way. Lies. So this ain't new.
Well, under the trial rules, the Dominion did request for admission to Fox. And in the pleading, Fox admitted to the material allegations of the complaint. They admitted, 1, that they submitted false information to the public. 2, they admitted that they perpetrated a lie about the product of Dominion being defective was untrue. So all of the elements to prove a prima facie case, Fox admitted in the request for admission. Now, the judge had appointed a special master to look into Fox lying and discovery of abuse. So in other words, Fox lawyers felt some unusual pressure in this case to come clean, because apparently they're playing fast and loose by filing false information. They've, like, for example, they had reiterated that Rupert Murdoch was not even active in the corporation, which was a big lie by the lawyer. So the lawyers themselves face a significant sanction, including professional sanction for misconduct under the Candor Rule of Rule 3.3 of the Ethics Code. So they admitted to lying in court documents, but unfortunately, the court documents weren't shown to the national. It wasn't published, so they should have put it on the newspaper. So here's what Fox admitted to: 1, to being a bunch of lying people and admitting that they lied, and they did this and that. And so, when you watch the TV telecast, the weakness in this is that they're not showing the actual pleadings.
Right, right. The public doesn't read the pleadings. They're not reading what you're talking about. They're looking at TV daily to get their information.
Yeah. Well, we have one on our chat. Renee want to know about, is there a difference about the standing the ground laws? And yes, Renee, the states' stand your ground laws are not all the same. I mean, there's like about 30 states or so with it, and there are different variations of how they interpret the original Castle Doctrine.
And
yeah, go ahead.
Attorney Lee, absolutely, that the stand your ground laws that have proliferated across the country in the last several years, we know that a stand your ground law was used as a defense in the murder 10 years ago of Trayvon Martin. But those laws, they take the Castle Doctrine a step further, and again, they vary from state to state, and those stand your ground laws take the position that an individual has the right to protect themselves and to stand their ground, and has no duty to retreat if they have a reasonable belief that they are threatened or perceive, harm to themselves. And they can use force, even deadly force, in those situations.
The operative word, though, is the reasonable. Reasonable is the operative word, belief. So you still can't justify shooting an unarmed teenager who knocks on your door.
Absolutely. We're in these random shootings that we've seen just this week alone, at least 4 of them. We have to stress that stand your ground laws or the castle doctrine doesn't give you a right to shoot as a result of any perceived threat. That threat must be real. There must be a real threat of deadly force or harm. And certainly if someone is ringing your bell and you're behind your locked door, there is no reasonable threat that would justify the use of deadly force. But again, this speaks to the danger of guns in our society.
And by the way, I always is really thinking about this Dominion case. They want to know whether or not business expenses or the settlement is deductible under the tax rule. That's pretty simple. Corporations get sued every day in America. They sue everybody. They sue people and they get sued. It's the cost of doing business. Corporations sue all the time. They hire lawyers. They have incredible expenses, and they certainly get to write those expenses off. It's, if you're Fox News, I guess it's the ordinary course of thing. If you're going to go on TV and lie about things like this, you're going to get sued. You're going to have, you have a mountain of legal expenses. And those lawyers aren't cheap. Their hourly bill, I saw now some of these lawyers charging up to $2,500 per hour. Now, look at one of the pleadings in one of the cases, wow. So, that's what, $20,000 per day. And so when I watched the Dominion case, I'm not sure what the Dominion lawyers, I'm thinking they probably did a contingent fee, and typically it's 1/3, but so the folks will know. But the case had some extraordinary expenses with all the deposition they took. On the low end of that case, it looked like they took 50 to 75 deposition. If you multiply that times an average of about $2,000 per deposition, so deposition costs alone, you're going to have somewhere between $150,000 to $300,000 just in deposition. And they probably videotaped them and then add another $100,000 to the cost of the litigation. So, and I was watching the trial, looked like they had about 50 boxes of evidence, which it's kind of old school now, because now when you do trials, at least the trials that I'm doing, it's all electric documents now. So used to, you would do trials, we'd take in, a dozen bankers boxes, at the courtroom. The last trial I did, we had 2 poster boards and I didn't get to use them. I took the poster board of my best evidence into court. The gigantic poster board, the size of as big as your door and wide, And so the person says the critical evidence, Milton, I try to have that for the jury, but now in our local system here and in federal court, they have the ability to project that from your laptop, and each jury have their own TV screen. So you don't need posters anymore. It's all electronic. In fact, a lot of courts won't even allow you to leave the evidence like that anymore. You take it with you. So we've seen a transformation. So when I was watching this trial, when the lawyer was going to court with like 50 boxes, I was thinking, exactly, what are they doing? You know, I was wondering whether or not they were doing that for the TV cameras, or they actually using their boxes to present evidence buying this for the jury. You know, that was one thing that I had a question about when the trial. So maybe when we do a seminar, I asked one of those lawyers, because I thought that they were just kind of taking the boxes just for show, Milton. I mean,
Well, nothing beats the show, brother. You
Yeah.
know, that's who I learned from, the showman. Oh.
well, the other issue, we the thing that's been bothering Attorney Banks is this abortion issue is getting insane now. Where does it stop? Now we're saying that we can't, FDA approved medicine can't be used by pharmacists. Where are we headed with this? Now we have some federal judge down in Texas said that you cannot sell this product that result in an aborted fetus. And I was wondering, I say, so now they're going to start regulating medicine in the courts? I'm thinking, what judge have a pharmacy degree? You know, it drives me nuts when I see these type ruling, Attorney Banks. I don't know, what's your thought process about this?
Well, I was happy to see the U.S. Supreme Court in a 7-2 decision with Justice Thomas and Alito dissenting, which stayed the Fifth Circuit Texas case and those other lower court decisions that would have banned or limited the FDA-approved use of the abortion medication, mifepristone. I mean, this medication is safer than penicillin and Viagra. It was approved over 20 years ago. It's been used safely around the world. And you're right, Attorney Lee, I've not heard of these justices having, medical degrees. The FDA standard is the gold standard for review, approval, clinical trials and testing of medications and drugs around the world. And as far as I know, and those who study this on a day-to-day basis, I'm not aware of any other court decision where a court has suspended the use of a medication approved by the FDA. And so where does it stop?
It's insane. Well, let's take a caller. Kim, you have a question or comment for us today?
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, super. So I'm really more of a food for thought, and wondering if a suggestion might fare well with you guys. But at any rate, it has a lot to do with boycotting and the fact that we have been, for what seems ever, under the thumb of those that would oppress us in one way or the other. And all of the information that we have that educates us is perfect for helping us to understand what we should do next or what we should do about it. So I bring up the thought of the Alabama, the bus boycott, which at one point was the most successful financial boycott in American history. And it was obviously a group of people that said we refuse to bankroll a company that refuses just like, humans. So when I think of how successful they were, because they brought that bus company to the brink of bankruptcy in just better than a year. The way that they got, obviously, the people to listen was because they wouldn't put any more money in their pocket. Now, I think that we've all had this conversation before, but I actually feel like God gave me a plan. for how we could do this from the comfort of our home and not be have the threat of any danger, like when dogs were turned on our people in the past, and not be from the threat of. And it would be a matter for those who would participate of joining an app that I've already built. I just haven't published it. It's called Beyond the Protest. And all that happens is when a company, and I'm just randomly calling a name, but when a company, let's say a Walmart, has demonstrated racism and they don't do anything about it, if the country, being a certain amount of Black people, refuse to do business with Walmart, then obviously Walmart would lose a great deal of money because they've gotten rich off of a lot of the small communities back. But if by chance we boycotted a Walmart, not only would that give Walmart reason to pause and listen to what we had to say, but it would give the police departments, and I'm going to tell you how, politicians and everyone else reason to take a look at our concerns, because the one thing they've never wanted us to do, obviously, is unite. But the other thing is, if we ever begin to control our dollar, we actually take all the power back. And I believe that the Alabama bus boycott was the perfect example God put in place to say, withdraw the money. So
Well, Kim, Kim,
Sure.
one thing that's significant here, I want to make something real clear. These judges were Trump appointees, so the origin of this problem dealt with election and failure of people to vote, right? So if you take the election that Trump won, if we get like 10% more African-American vote, Trump is not the president, and we don't have these judges, and so we wouldn't have these crazy laws that they're passing, like overruling Roe versus Wade. So the number one way that we deal with this issue is to the ballot box. We have to get your friends, your neighbors to vote. You know, in our local election here, we're projecting 9 to 10% of people are going to vote in the primary. So, you know, so the number one way, and I agree with you that the boycott certainly has a significant effect on American politics and American businesses. I agree, the boycott has been very successful. But right now, we have an issue where the minority party is actually controlling the dialogue because you have 5 Supreme Court judges, 6 Supreme Court judges who were appointed by Republicans who won the presidency. And we had, and what caused this fiasco, was Ruth Bader Ginsburg then decided not to retire when Obama was president, even though she had cancer, didn't retire, and Trump get elected president, and she died in office. And then within 30 days, they appointed another Supreme Court judge. So historically speaking, you deal with this particular legal issue at the ballot box. The boycott wouldn't make it different because the Supreme Court judge is not paying attention to boycotts, that's for sure.
Yeah, but the cooperation is what she's saying. The cooperation feels the effect of the present day boycott, and they will listen and change their practice if their pockets don't get filled as they're used to them being filled.
Absolutely.
Before you go, but listen, sir, please give me opportunity before you go there. You do realize that Wall Street is getting fatter off of bail bonds. As a matter of fact, it is written into local municipalities' budget that they get paid as amount of the bail bonds. Now, let me just, for a moment before you go there, as long as you consider the obstacle, with God, because this is a Christian program, then it's bigger than he is. They laid out the plan, and all I'm saying is you will affect every single area of government. And because to really push, let's just get people out to vote. Let's get people out to vote. That's right. But we can get more people out to vote if they see progress. We can get more people out to vote because right now, people feel helpless. But if you give them an opportunity to take action and an action plan, a blueprint and a roadmap, if Dr. King and the civil rights workers did it in 1 year with no phone, barely a car, no internet, nothing to communicate except for churches that they change. So we don't have to have a cause per se other than we're tired. How many times do we have to have a conversation about shooting? How many times do we have to have a conversation about government, politics, what's been done wrong? It's never worked. If anything, some people get their...
Yeah. Okay, we lost her. Okay.
Many of the callers' points, if not all of them, are very, 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 of course, well taken.
Yes. And Pierre, you have a question coming for legal to speak, and I'm trying to keep these coming to 1 minute or so everybody.
Yeah, I'll shorten it up. I can keep mine short. Just 2 points. Before Dominion could have sued Fox, did they have to tell Fox to stop putting out those falsehoods, or they were going to get sued? And the second thing, and the second point I want to make is, it seems like the Supreme Court is being manipulated, and I don't think that that's what the Supreme Court should be used at. What I mean is, it seems like these groups are creating these controversies in one district, in one jurisdiction, and another jurisdiction, in order to get a case to go to the Supreme Court. Or like out in California, they're manufacturing these cases to go to the Supreme Court. And I mean, there's tens of thousands of people and groups who want their case to go to the Supreme Court that are legitimate beefs, but they never get past the appellate courts. And I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you for taking my call, Nate.
Well, wait a second. Hey, Pierre, let me tell you something. You made a good point. Let me explain to you what I see as the issue. First of all, it's very rare that any case go to U.S. Supreme Court, and you made a good point. But the problem is we have a scandal now. We've determined that the Supreme Court judges, starting with Clarence Thomas, is being bought and paid for by these billionaires. You know, they say that he's had these luxury trips and that is $500,000. He is flown across to another country on a Gulfstream jet. And they were saying that he had these trips every year. And they said they estimated the cost to be $500,000. I'm thinking, they're out of their freaking mind. One trip on the Gulfstream going to cost them $150,000 where they went round trip. And so now we have judges on the highest court who are getting substantial sums of money from conservative investors in the court. They say, well, he didn't have a case before the court, but guess what? That investor got friends that have cases that come before the court. And so now we have a system whereby we actually can lose faith in our democracy, because anybody would have a problem with a sitting Supreme Court judge taking that much money from men who have these draconian views, and it seems like is affecting the type of cases they're receiving. It seems like there's a direct correlation between these investors and these Supreme Court judges. I mean, this was unheard of. You know, if, you know, I've had friends that took positions in the administration, and, you know, I go to DC to meet with them, and they would not allow me to pay for the lunch. They said, Ms. Lee, I can't let you pay for my lunch. Why? Well, I'm a federal employee. So low level, well, they're not low level necessarily, but they're just federal employees who are lawyers who said that they cannot accept a free lunch. And I'm thinking, okay, but the highest court in the country, I mean, it's just shocking to me, Milton. I don't know. I know that guy in California, Giraldi, did similar things there. And
Tom Girardi.
Yeah. I don't know. I think he's got a point there. I'm concerned about this court, more so than ever.
Oh, we can trust Clarence to keep his ethics in sight, can't we? His wife will make sure that she will make sure he keep his ethics right.
And
right, Vanita?
I'm sorry, I was thinking about Attorney Grimes, the issue that Pierre had raised relative to these groups using litigation to bring these cases. And one of the things that I've been looking at, and I think it's really questionable whether or not the pro-life doctors group that brought the suit challenging the FDA approval of the abortion medication, whether that group even has standing to bring a suit, in the case. What damage would this medical association have as a result of this FDA approved drug or medication? What would their what are their damages? So I question their standing to even bring this case.
Well, I don't know their makeup, and I'm sure the court questioned their standing if they filed a lawsuit. Vanita, I don't know.
And
They're manufactured lawsuits. They're not real.
right.
I mean,
agree.
It's not somebody that got hurt and they went and found a lawyer and then they took it to all the way through the process. These groups are being funded by APAC, whatever the name is, and they just get together and they create these controversies to push their agenda, and they get to go to the Supreme Court, and it's not fair, and they're just manufactured lawsuits. Thanks for taking my call.
Well, here's my problem with this case. This was a 113-page complaint filed by the group called Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine, right? And in their complaint, I'll read one of the paragraph. On paragraph 270, here's what they say, to Attorney Banks' point. Quote, as more women and girls require treatment in emergency department, comma, the other patients of the treating doctors are adversely affected. With the increase in women and girls suffering emergency complications from chemical abortion or seeking to reverse the effects of chemical abortion regimen, there is a direct correlation in the decrease in time, attention, and resources that emergency department doctors have to treat their other patients. That got to be the dumbest thing I've ever read. In other words, they're saying that we're going to protect some esoteric person that we've never met, that we have no medical records to prove in some emergency room, get a reduction in service because they're treating some person who have an adverse reaction to the abortion pill. It's just outrageous. I mean, most judges would have dismissed that on the face and sanctioned the lawyers as being ludicrous.
Absolutely. It's absolutely ludicrous. Long-standing precedent stands for the proposition that there must be an actual case and a controversy, that courts do not issue opinions based on hypotheticals, and those arguments run afoul of Supreme Court decisions. In the most recent case, Clapper versus Amnesty International, the court stated that the plaintiffs must prove that the injury is certainly impending. The threat can't be purely hypothetical and potential, and it can't be based on speculation about independent decisions by other people who aren't in the actual court. And so an organization can't manufacture standing, to Pierre's point, by incurring the cost of preemptive measures against the possibility of some future injury. So currently, the court has stayed this Fifth Circuit case. And for now, mifepristone is still widely available, at least in those states where abortion is legal for up to 10 weeks. The case is scheduled for oral arguments on May 17th, and the Fifth Circuit ruling in the case may certainly wind up back in the Supreme Court, which may rule on the issue next term. So we'll see.
Well, daggone, maybe I'm worried about summary judgment and being dismissed too much. We can just file anything we want and not worry about summary judgment and getting dismissed. Or there's just some people don't have to worry about it.
It's insane that this lawsuit is filed by some esoteric group, conservative group, that when they did more and more dealing, you see these billionaires making payments to these group. And what we see is the erosion of American democracy. These type lawsuits represent an existential threat to democracy itself. If now, one of the things about this country, American exceptionalism, is people have individual freedom. We have freedom to make choices. And now we're seeing a radical departure by the court saying that we don't have individual freedoms anymore, that women's rights are going back to 1921 when they were given the right to vote. We're saying that, I guess women are going to become property again. And if they go after women, next thing you go after Black folks. I'm getting concerned about this. So these laws are insane. And also, one of the thing that I've noticed is that since Trump started this raid when he ran for president, coming down the escalator, and he was saying the Mexicans was drug dealers and rapists without evidence. It seemed like the tone in America has become more acrimonious, and we're seeing the adoption of these crazy esoteric views. I mean, who would ever think that you would sue the FDA for approval of medication that had been used successfully for all these years? So now, are we going to have a lawsuit every time they dislike the results of it based against the federal government? Obviously, they will not have standing.
Well, wouldn't you expect the FDA to protest and come up with a summary judgment or dismissal if this claim that you're saying, that y'all are saying, is so fraudulent and so false? I mean, they know the law.
Absolutely. But if you are in a court that with this Fifth Circuit judge, for example, this Trump appointee,
Texas.
I mean, all the argument in the world didn't result in him not issuing a decision banning the use of a medication that's been used over 20 years and have been found to be absolutely safe.
What I don't understand is that when I did these class action, I did cases with NAACP, we had to get affidavits from victims. In other words, you had to get affidavits to show standing, and that's what I don't understand. Let's go to the data, Mr. Next caller, Metcalf. You have a question or comment for us today, sir?
All right, Brother Nate.
How you doing?
All right, Brother Motep. How you doing? I just wanted to ask you, I didn't get a chance to catch up. I figured you all went through the Supreme Court, Jim Jordan and DA Bragg and all that agreement. Can you explain, I don't know if you did, can you explain what kind of agreement why is that? My mother said that they don't even have standing. The federal government shouldn't even be responsible for what's going on with state crimes and the fact that that's a state issue. We always talk about state rights. And then secondly, with the shooting in Kansas City and the problems with someone shooting through a door, and then this gentleman is claiming in Missouri, they have some quirky laws in Missouri about stand your ground and this and the third. What's your opinion on that? Because we know from Florida research, University of Tampa and stuff like that, there are some problems with stand your ground laws all over, but he's claiming stand your ground. He was scared, and Missouri has some quirky laws. there. So I'd like to hear your opinions on those, and thanks for taking my call.
I missed the first part. Did you get that? Yeah.
I didn't quite understand the first part either.
Yeah, I missed that. So I didn't get that MOTEP. But these standing ground laws, they're not identical from state to state. There are some political experts who are saying that the stand your ground laws may not help him in Missouri. And I've never done a case in Missouri that I had to, but the Missouri stand your ground law, basically in their code, it's got something unique about it. Section 2 of the law said that the actor was the initial aggressor. You know, so the first paragraph of the law saying that the person who is being shot should be the initial aggressor. And so I'm not sure how you're going to meet the first element of that, but the law is pretty lengthy law, but the defendant has the burden to prove that. So I don't think that the stand your ground law is going to help that guy who shot the teenager in Missouri.
I would think that the basic thread through all of this is a reasonable belief, whether it's perceived or actual, that you are in danger. That's what the person has to show. It can't just be, I shoot a person coming to my door. I have to have a reasonable belief, whether it's true or not, that there's a danger. And a person simply coming to a door and knocking is not a reasonable belief that that's a danger. You know, you got to do something to justify getting shot.
Yeah. One closing comment, Attorney Banks.
These headlines this week, to your point, Attorney Lee, relative to our democracy, these headlines speak to why voting is so critically important. It's not optional. You must vote out those politicians that don't represent your interest and your children's interest. Our democracy is at stake.
Well, for the record, as soon as I hang up the show in about 30 seconds, I'm headed to vote in our primary. Here in Indianapolis, we have a number of important races, and I'm going to vote, me and my family. That's where we're headed. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. Next week, we have exciting issues. We had so many legal issues today, we couldn't cover them all, but that's why we're here, legal issues of today. Take care and God bless each and every one of you. Until next week, take care.
Have a great day.